We begin this hour with the Supreme Court striking blow to the future of President Trump's signature economic policy. Yesterday, 3 conservative justices joined the High Court's 3 liberal justices in the 6-3 decision that ruled Trump exceeded his authority when he used a law reserved for national emergencies to impose his sweeping global tariffs. The ruling invalidates many, but not all, of the tariffs Trump has implemented so far. Chief Justice John Roberts authored the majority opinion, writing, quote, "The president asserts the extraordinary power to unilaterally impose tariffs of unlimited amount, duration, and scope. In light of the breadth, history, and constitutional context of that asserted authority, he must identify clear congressional authorization to exercise it." In response, Trump lobbed some baseless accusations at the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is deeply disappointing, and I'm ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what's right for our country. It's my opinion that the court has been swayed by foreign interests and a political movement that is far smaller than people would ever think. Today, I will sign an order to impose a 10% global tariff under Section 122 over and above our normal tariffs already being charged.
And in defiance of the decision, he signed an executive order last night imposing an additional 10% tariff on all countries, quote, effective immediately. He also suggested the administration does not plan to refund businesses that paid for his tariffs because it's not addressed in the court's ruling. But despite the uncertainty, many in the retail industry view the ruling as a win. And it's also seen as a victory for Democratic governors, particularly in Oregon, a lead plaintiff in the case. Oregon's Attorney General Dan Rayfield wrote in a statement, quote, "Today, the Supreme Court made it clear that no president gets to levy taxes on Americans disguised as tariffs. The evidence shows that the cost of tariffs doesn't land on farm producers. It gets passed straight through to people at the checkout line." And joining us now is that Attorney General, Oregon's Attorney General Dan Rayfield. Attorney General, welcome back to the weekend. Congratulations on the victory at the Supreme Court. But let me read to you from the dissenting opinion from Justice Kavanaugh, and hear what he had to say about refunds. He wrote, "The court says nothing today about whether, and if so, how the government should go about returning the billions of dollars that it has collected from importers. But that process is likely to be a mess, as was acknowledged at oral argument." And so, Attorney General, one, does Justice Kavanaugh have a point? And two, will anyone see any of that tariff money returned?
Well, I mean, come on. Remember what they were saying prior to this decision when they were talking about issuing these tariff refunds and how easy those tariff refunds would be for all Americans. It was going to be amazing for us, right? If it was so easy then, it's going to be so easy now. I kind of look at it when my son makes a mess in his room. I don't ask him how he's going to clean it up. I say, you just got to clean it up. It's your responsibility. The federal government did this. They did it when they knew they were going to lose. Their lawyers probably told them this was unconstitutional. They had 2 lower court rulings telling them, hey, this is unconstitutional, and they plowed ahead anyway. It is their responsibility to figure it out. They can figure out how to do tax refunds, and they better figure out how to put that money back in Americans' pockets. You just don't get to take money away from Americans unconstitutionally without doing it. Now, the things that should really frustrate Americans is that in legal pleadings that were filed with the court, signed by the federal government's lawyers, they said they were going to give back money to the plaintiffs with interest. So this was kind of shocking to hear the president say that, and maybe he just hasn't understanding the law or he hasn't talked to his own attorneys. But I do expect refunds to be paid, and frankly, Americans should expect it.
Yeah. You know who doesn't? The President of the United States. I want to play what he said at the White House on Friday about the refunds.
So I said, well, what happens to all the money that we took in? It wasn't discussed. Wouldn't you think they would have put one sentence in there saying that keep the money or don't keep the money, right?
Are you saying that you don't plan to honor refunds for companies that file for them?
I just told you the answer, right? I told you the answer. It's not discussed. We'll end up being in court for the next 5 years.
I want to stay on this because it feels like the president might be right here. It wasn't in the ruling. So why should the American people anticipate that, or the people of Oregon, why should they anticipate that whatever lawsuit that you guys would file would actually indicate and give them money back in their pockets?
Well, effectively, what the opinion was that came out of the Supreme Court was a ruling on the merits, right? Once you get a ruling on the merits, effectively you think about the liability. Who did what and why did they do it wrong, right? And in this case, it was very clear that the federal government screwed up, right? They violated the Constitution in taking our money, American people's money. Now, when you screw up, you have to make it right. And so what we call the remedy in this case, this is what we're asking the court to do. Once they've made a determination on fault, they then have to pay that money back. And so there will be lawsuits moving forward. There is, in our current complaints, an actual remedy. And the plaintiffs in this case are seeking money to reimbursements. And again, I got to remind everybody, look at the government's own pleadings. They said, if we're wrong, if we screwed up, if this is unconstitutional, we will pay reimbursements and we'll do it with interest. So his lawyers are saying something incredibly different than the president, the same filings that they're putting in court.
Two of your lawmakers, your congresspeople, have actually introduced a bill to force this issue, the Restoring Economic Lifelines for Independent Enterprises and Family Businesses Act, sort of banking on the fact that they believe litigation is going to be contentious and take potentially years. Do you think that a bill, something being passed through Congress, is a more expeditious way for people to be returned their money?
I would say that it's good governance to think about what are the most efficient ways to return money that has been taken from Americans and do it as quickly as possible. So I think you could have a president that would look at his responsibility and realize that he made an unconstitutional act and took money from Americans and businesses, and you could administratively find ways to give it back, just like the many times they talked about doing those tariff refunds. It's also reasonable that Congress could sit there and say, hey, you know, this is going to be much easier and much faster for us to pass a bill to get this done. I'm agnostic to how the money gets returned to Americans, but the fact remains that it needs to be returned to Americans. Kind of my job and our job for Oregonians in America as attorneys general is to make sure that executives like the president follow the law. That's our job. It is now on to the executive branch to figure out how do you make it right.
How novel. Get them to follow the law. Oregon
Good
Attorney
luck with
General
that, sir.
Dan Rayfield, thank you very much for coming back to the weekend.
Absolutely. Good to see you all.
And joining us now, Richard Haass, President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations and author of Home and Away on Substack. Richard, thank you very much for coming back to the weekend. Right out the gate, how do you think the Supreme Court decision on tariffs will impact our allies around the world?
Look, in general, they're happy with the decision. First of all, it's a real reassertion of checks and balances and American democracy, and that's something they will find comfort in. They'll also like the fact that it makes it slightly more difficult for the president to impose tariffs. They've been the targets of those, but they're under no illusions. Tariffs will continue. The president still thinks tariffs are beautiful things. If anything, it's going to possibly become even more complicated, as your discussion showed, because they'll be in place for limited amounts of time under this or that authority. So it'll probably create a slightly more, complex, changing trade picture.
Richard, it feels like internationally and with our allies, our typical allies, the folks we think, the die is cast and the damage is done. I'm thinking about, Canada doing that EV, trade agreement with China, right? And other countries saying, maybe we need to move away from the United States as a partner and that we share economic realities with. And so when you look at the impacts that we've already seen, is there a way to pull some of that back if these tariffs are gone, or if because it's going to be maybe a little bit chaotic, right? Like 10% tariffs and it only lasts for 2 months and people don't know how to plan, does it make it much harder for them to do so?
No, it's a fair question, Gene. I think for our principal trading partners, this doesn't change the basics. The United States has become a less predictable, less consistent, more protectionist economic actor operating outside the World Trade Organization and the like. So I think they'll continue to diversify their trade portfolios, their investment portfolios. They're also worried that greater interaction with the United States, whatever the advantages, also leaves them vulnerable to this or that American export control or sanction or tariff. So my guess is they're going to continue to look for alternative partners.
And Richard, we're going to do a little bit of a hard pivot because I thought we would be spending most of this morning talking about going into potential war with Iran before the Supreme Court announced their opinion. But where do you think things stands there? There's obviously some competing narratives here. The U.S. still maintaining that the bottom line is zero enrichment for Iranians. But then you had the foreign minister come on Morning Joe yesterday saying, actually, diplomatic negotiations are apace. And that is not the bottom line that the administration has, at least in private meetings, offered in discussions. What's your take on where things stand? And whether or not you think limited strikes, which is what the Wall Street Journal has been reporting, could potentially be effective?
Well, Jackie, first of all, it's hard to make sense of U.S. policy because it's somewhere between incoherent and opaque. The United States has assembled all these forces. It's not clear what the objectives would be, what would be our definition of success. It's not even clear what triggered it. The only new thing coming out of Iran the last couple of months is not their nuclear program, not their missile program, not support for proxies. It's their slaughter of Iranian dissidents. And it's not at all clear how American aircraft carriers and the like and airplanes could protect individual Iranians or bring about regime change or anything else. So I literally do not understand American policy. And by the way, the administration hasn't bothered to explain it. Congress hasn't bothered to hold hearings and ask questions about it. This idea of a limited strike, yeah, the president may feel compelled to do something because threats don't seem to have moved the Iranians. The problem with limited strikes, by definition, is what happens if they don't do the trick? Do you then double down or triple down? Then we find ourselves in a large war. And by the way, Iran has all sorts of ways to inflict pain on oil shipping, on oil refineries and wells, on American forces in the region. So we shouldn't kid ourselves that simply because we want to keep an interaction limited, the Iranians do. It only takes one to start something, but it takes two to manage it and end it.
Richard, real quickly, let's say the president does indeed does some kind of kinetic action in Iran. How destabilizing will that be to the region?
Again, it all depends upon the Iranian response. I think internally Iran has institutions, can probably absorb it. The real question is whether they retaliate and whether they go after the Saudis or go after shipping, in which case the oil prices go up. So in a funny sort of way, after we strike, if we do, it cedes the initiative to Iran. They've got to decide how they want to manage the crisis.
Richard Haass, thanks so much for breaking all of those vast range of topics down for us.